Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Early signing day is on its way, almost concluding. We still have a couple more flips and commitments to go. But the major winner throughout the day has have to have been the Oregon Ducks, landing guys like Matayo Uiagalelei, Peyton Bowen, guys that not necessarily were expected to go to Oregon. This was Peyton Bowen even came out and said, I wasn't sure where I was even going to go until I put on the hat. This is a massive win for Dan Lanning in a program that if you're an Oregon Ducks fan and what you saw this year for the Ducks, you have to be extremely optimistic about where this program is going under the leadership of Dan Lanning. And it can't really come at a surprise that he's recruiting well. I think what you're going to get more of, though, is the development. I mean, at Dan Lanning, when he was at Georgia, put out a ton of guys to the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. I think you're going to see a lot of the same at Oregon. Before we get into the players, what this means for the program, I just want to say thanks, guys, for the support you guys have shown. Again, this has been a crazy couple of weeks in college football. We've been working our tails off to talk about all the storylines, and the support you guys have shown over the last couple of weeks has been absolutely amazing. The best way to support this channel is to subscribe, and really all the support you guys have shown truly does mean a lot. Dill, I'm going to kick it off to you. Oregon Ducks and the outlook for the Oregon Ducks under Dan Lanning. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, no two ways about it. They killed it today, and I think going in, you were a little kind of hit in the face a little bit with the Dante Moore
Yep.
news, and that hurt. And I guess you kind of probably saw it coming to an extent when Kenny Dillingham went to Arizona State. But still, losing a guy of his ilk is obviously very painful. But to replace him with an Austin Novosad, who is obviously committed to Baylor, makes me think though that Novosad would have been at Oregon if they didn't get Dante Moore in the first place. So I'm sure that wasn't like a re-recruitment kind of or first time recruitment. It was probably the relationship was certainly there,
And you heard throughout the week that once Dante Moore on Monday flipped to UCLA, like they had a plan. They had a plan to get a quarterback in the 2023 class. And I mean, this guy's no slouch, like a top 120 dude. He's a very, very good quarterback that was kind of Baylor's number one guy in their class. And Oregon just kind of nips him off. And he just fits right into it. What's really shaping up to be a really good class. You see 24/7 has him as a top 8 program, and they don't even have Peyton Bowen updated yet. So this is going to be a really strong class. And what you're even more optimistic about is this isn't nothing really new for the Oregon Ducks. Mario Cristobal recruited really well at Oregon. That was kind of how he made his money at Oregon. What you were not so thrilled about if you're an Oregon Ducks fan is like the in-game coaching and the development at some positions where he just really wasn't maximizing. There was a period of time in the Pac-12 where Mario Cristobal was bringing in the best talent when USC was kind of slumping. And Oregon wanted their fair share, but you would have expected a little bit more of a dominating performance in the Pac-12 than Mario Cristobal gave at the Oregon Ducks. And so, I mean, I think you're going to get not only the talent for Dan Lanning, but the development, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
And I mean, at the end of the day, that's going to be the big thing. And I think even being able to keep guys, I know Dan Lanning came out and said we don't have guys in the transfer portal who are freshmen, and I think that matters in today's day and age for sure when transferring is very easy. And I mean, Oregon didn't have a great season by any means. I think they'd even say it was a little disappointing, especially how they finished. But again, he's been able to keep the ship together, and if he can roll this class in and get a fair amount out of it, like the talent's there to be, I mean, certainly be the best Pac-12 team. I mean, they're even more so on a very national level. I think they should be competitive if they can keep these classes and prevent maybe what happened at like a Texas A&M where they lost so much of it, and it doesn't seem like there's much of a culture being built, if you will.
Yeah, I think yes, NIL still means a lot, and Oregon is going to take care of business on the NIL front. I have no doubt about that, but it's one thing to bring in talent. It's another thing to get the best out of the talent. And obviously we saw schools like Texas A&M and even Bama to an extent this year not really get the best out of the talent. You look at coaches around the country that are elite developers. Dan Lanning has to come to mind. Yeah, he brought in a lot of really, really good athletes to that Georgia defense. Guys like Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, Jordan Davis. I mean, it's one thing to come in as a 5-star, and it's another thing to put 6 guys in the first round on the defensive side of the ball like Dan Lanning did. Like, he's a proven not only recruiter, and that's no doubt why Oregon wanted him, but the development that you're going to get if you're a Ducks fan, you have to be extremely excited about. And this doesn't feel like it's a Texas A&M recruiting class where they're just coming because they got offered a lot of money in NIL. Like Peyton Bowen, Matayo U, they're looking at the guys that Dan Lanning has put in the league. Like for Peyton Bowen's case in the States, he's like Lewis Seen, Christopher Smith's going to go to the NFL. And then at the defensive line, it's a laundry list of guys that Dan Lanning and company have put into the NFL. And that's really where you're going to make your real money. Like you're going to make some money in the NIL, but if you can go and develop into a first round pick, that is the NIL. That is making.
That's at the end of the day, and I know that's what Deion Sanders says. It's not NIL, it's NIL, not it's NFL, not NIL. Sorry, and that's like I think that perfectly sums it up, and I think that's what we'll see. This is it's hard to say now. You don't know who's suffered from it, but I mean, you saw Matt Rule subtweeting everybody, including Oregon for that matter. I don't know why I was doing that, but
I saw that
the money bags with the ghost, and he's obviously did it at Miami, who's obviously putting together their own really good class. But I think there's going to be this is something these coaches and Dan Lanning should have a lot of experience doing it because Georgia was essentially putting out together teams that was very hard to keep guys on board because it was so hard to play there, even if you were an elite player. So you'd like to think Dan Lanning should be able to manage that sort of problem. I mean, it's a good problem, but it's a problem.
And he did a really good job. Like Georgia had a few guys. I think that's a great point. Georgia had a few guys who left, and that was just because simply like they weren't going to see the field. But you look how good this Georgia. I know Dan Lanning isn't coaching Georgia's defense now, but you look at how good that Georgia defense is. Even though they lost pretty much the whole defense to the NFL, like they stayed around, they developed on the practice field, and now they're damn good football players. Now, I want to talk about like the two kind of crown jewels in my mind of today, the guys that Oregon fans might not know much about. Matayo U, obviously DJ's little brother. This dude's a stud, and you're going to see. We're just going to watch like a couple plays of what this guy brings to the table. He's playing tight end. I mean, at the end of the day, he is the best athlete on the field. He's a big body. You see the athleticism, you see the coordination, and you see the physicality. Even at a school like St. John Bosco, Matayo U, was a guy that they just wanted to get the football to and have an impact on the game. And he's probably going to play edge at 6'5", 265 pounds already. And this dude is a guy that's going to come in as a true freshman and play, and especially with Oregon losing a couple of guys to the portal on the defensive line. This guy's a freak athlete, and they're just going to try to get him on the field and develop him because he's got all the tools in the tool shed to be an elite dude.
Yeah, and I think naturally defensive line, especially on that edge, like these guys who are of the cloth of a Matayo Uiagalelei, and he's got the body, he's got the physicality to do it. I think he should be able to step in because he's just that good of an athlete. And I think when you're that type of guy, it does make it practical to play. And you're right, they didn't have a great day. I think their defensive line even underperformed. I think that's why you see a bunch of them in the portal. I wouldn't be surprised me if Dan Lanning kind of like, okay, we're moving ahead. Like you're gonna get some young guys in. We're gonna play a little different than we are, and guys are moving on. But that's gonna be a big thing. I think this Oregon team is gonna turn over a little quicker just because I don't think he's gonna want to play the defense they did this year.
He's got like he's got the Nick Saban selling point of you want to go to the NFL, you want to be a high draft pick, come play for me. Like that's how Nick Saban has won the recruiting battles for the last decade and a half at Alabama's. Alabama's just putting every single dude that comes on that roster in the NFL as high picks. And that's what Georgia's been doing. That's what Georgia did last year. And he's pointing to all those guys that developed in the Georgia system. And that's an easy sell. If you're a guy that's looking to go to the NFL and you're picking where you want to go play college football, and Dan Lanning's got a proven track record of doing that. The next guy I want to talk about is Peyton Bowen, who this was even a surprise for me. It must be a surprise for the Oregon fans. It committed to Notre Dame for a very long time, was kind of their crown jewel dude from Denton, Texas. And then it seems like he's going to go to Oklahoma. It seemed like Oklahoma was making a push with the NIL. Oregon comes in and takes advantage. And this is another guy similar to Matayo where he's not just a safety right now. He's like an elite athlete where you got to get him, find him a position, probably going to play safety in the defensive backfield, and then just develop it. And again, Dan Lanning, one of the best in the game at developing dudes on the defensive side of the ball. You're going to see right away like how special this dude is an athlete. Both these guys are college ready already. They played very, very high level at St. John Bosco. That's basically like a college prep school. You see a ton of guys have immediate success coming from that high school. They run that program like college, and playing football at Denton, Texas, like you're going to play against the elite guys in the whole country. And Peyton Bowen on the field with really, really good athletes is the best of the best. And you'll probably see him make an impact in the kick return and punt return like he did at high school. But this is a dude that, and you're getting two guys that are probably top 3 round draft picks as freshmen coming in. Or projected.
Frankly, they're at positions where there's a lot of room to
Ball
play.
skills.
I mean,
Ball
the
skills
safety was not a great spot at Oregon. I mean, the secondary in general was pretty weak. I think the defensive line, there wasn't certainly no first round draft picks on that D line at Oregon. So I think the two real studs you're getting are obviously or got on the signing day. Obviously, they're getting a ton of other really good players, but all guys who should be able to play quickly just because of where Oregon is probably needs guys to play.
And what the biggest thing, I think you make a really good point, is when you look at that Oregon team and like where do they need some playmakers and some depth, it's definitely in that defensive backfield. It was a young group, and outside of Christian Gonzalez, I don't think it was a great group. And so Dan Lanning addressing that. One thing about Peyton Bowen that I love is he did play pretty much all over the field. Similar to Matayo Uiagalelei, they were like, okay, this guy's the best football player on the field. We're going to let him impact the game on both sides of the ball and on special teams. And when you're a DB, having the background of playing wide receiver and being able to go up and make plays on the football is massive. And you see the biggest thing these DBs struggle with if they just play defensive back, and Travis Hunter's another good example of why he's such a good defensive back, is because he was an elite wide receiver too. The biggest thing, and as Michigan fans, we know this all too well, the problem, and you look at our best cornerback this year, Mikey Sandstrel, he was a former wide receiver. The problem is when that ball's in the air, you can be as athletic and have as good technique as you want. When that ball's in the air, you got to be able to go play it and make a play and be comfortable with the ball in the air. A lot of DBs, for as good of athletes they are, aren't very comfortable doing that. So when you see a DB that has basketball chops or that's played wide receiver in high school, I think that's a massive deal. Peyton Bowen checks that box, and he's going to be a guy that I think you got two guys in the 2023 class that are probably going to be playing meaningful snaps in 2023 as true freshmen.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree, and it's going to be interesting now to see what Oregon can get out of this class, how they can carry this momentum forward and do what they got to do.
I mean, this came out of nowhere. I mean, they got two. It's very rare you get 2 5-stars they didn't really know you were going to get. Like Matayo Uiagalelei, you weren't really going to sure where he was going. Peyton Bowen, like you knew Oregon was in the running, but you really thought most of the experts were Oklahoma or Notre Dame. He ends up going to Oregon, or I said that wrong. Notre Dame or Oklahoma. He ends up going to Oregon, even saying he wasn't really sure where he's going to go and probably just trusted his gut. Wanted to go play with Dan Lanning, one of the best defensive groomers in the whole entire country. Oregon, probably the biggest winner of 2023 National Signing Day. And again, I cannot wait to see what Dan Lanning does with all this talent. Very, very exciting if you're a Ducks fan. Again, wanted to keep this one short, but definitely wanted to talk about Oregon and how they just a dominant performance on National Signing Day for the Ducks. Again, appreciate the support you guys shown. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys for real, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.